It's the final, excuse me, it's the final day of the 2024 conference, and it's been wonderful to share this experience with all of you. So far, we've enjoyed 3 days of informative workshops, inspirational speakers, and productive networking, but we're not quite done. First up this morning, we will hear from DEP Acting Secretary Jessica Shirley, and later a panel of legislative leaders who will answer members' submitted questions about the matter of the state and local government partnerships. We're also excited this morning to recognize the next generation of leaders. We'll hand out our youth awards, acknowledging some deserving community service projects and recognition of the receipts of the PCN scholarships. Our final speaker, retired Air Force Major A.B., a pilot, will deliver what is certain to be an inspirational message. Before we wrap things up, we will be giving away our Scan Trivia prizes and the last of our punctuality and evaluation prizes, including a Stanley Power Station air compressor and an AZ Power Zipless cooler. Remember, must be present to win most of these prizes, so be sure to stick around and listen for your name. Before we get started with the general session, please again silence your cell phones and electronic devices. However, we encourage you to keep doing what you've been doing all week with PSAT's mobile app and continuing with your social media posts after the conference. Just do it quietly, please. I also have an important announcement. If you pre-ordered a copy of the Beyond the Code book to be picked up here at the conference and haven't picked it up yet, please do so immediately after this general session at the PSAT store. You may also purchase at the conference special priced immediately after the general session at the PSAT store. This is our last chance to get the book at the discounted price. Now let's welcome our first speaker. Thank you.
Jessica Shirley is currently serving as Acting Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. She previously served as a Policy Director from May 2016 to April 2022, where she shaped environmental and energy policy. She helped develop groundbreaking executive orders related to PFAS, water and air quality, energy conservation, and sustainability in Commonwealth operations. Previously, she served as Executive Policy Specialist, a trusted advisor in various policy areas, including oil and gas development, air quality, climate change, energy, waste, clean water, and environmental cleanup. Please welcome Acting Pennsylvania DEP Secretary Jessica Shirley.
Thank you. Hopefully my mic is on. I gave a speech last week to a room a little bit smaller than this, and about 5 minutes before I was done, a man walked over and turned the mic on, and I was like, oh no. So luckily they heard me. I'm pretty good at projecting, but I was quickly scanning the room to see if I saw any familiar faces, and I think I see a couple, but thank you so much for inviting me. I'm Jessica Shirley, the Interim Acting Secretary for the Department of Environmental Protection. I would like to thank PSATS, the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, for hosting such a great event. This is quite a production, I have to say. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Austin, Texas for the Environmental Council of the States, which is something similar where all of the environmental secretaries of all 50 states get together and we talk about issues that we're experiencing and different ideas, and it really left me feeling energized. So I hope when you guys leave here, you have that same feeling, that you feel energized, you have great ideas. I know some of you only come for the beer. I'm kidding. And the bingo. I heard there was a pretty riveting game of bingo last night. I'm jealous. I didn't have bingo whenever I went to Austin for the ECOS, but I really want to just talk. I have some talking points here. I'll try to go through them because I want to make sure that I hit the information that my folks tell me that I need to hit, but I also just want to say, this should really be a conversation between you all and my agency. For those of you that are not aware, DEP has 7 local government specialists, and they work in each of our regional offices. We have 6 regional offices. We have 2 local government specialists in our Southwest regional office. I think some of them were actually here for this session. I think there's a booth somewhere for them. Definitely make sure that you've made contact, you know who your local government liaison is, and make sure you get their card, make sure you have their number, because if you run into any issues or any questions that you have that you think it might be a little bit related to DEP, feel free to reach out to them and give them a call. But I think one of the reasons that we're all here today is because we all strongly believe that local government and state government and all of our officials can create huge opportunities for Pennsylvanians. And when township government collaborates and works with state agencies like DEP, we get stuff done. The governor uses a different word than stuff, but it's too early in the morning for me to use that. Maybe later. Together we must work collaboratively to protect Pennsylvania's air, land, and water from pollution and restore our natural resources. So yesterday, I was actually in Clinton County. I was visiting our North Central Regional Office, and they said, hey, Jess, let's go out and do a stream assessment. And I was like, all right, sounds great. So they strapped me up in waders, and I told them I pretty much grew up in a creek. That's where I'm from, Shippensburg. It's a creek. I mean, I know DEP, we use the term streams these days, Clean Streams Law and the Clean Streams Fund. I guess it's a little bit, but I grew up in a creek. But I have not been in one since I was probably 18 years old, I'm guessing. So it was a really great experience. We were electroshocking fish so that they float to the top, and we can take them out, look at them, evaluate them, measure their size. We were looking at bugs. I saw dragonfly larvae. Some of our folks, I swear, have the coolest jobs in the state. But really what it does is it highlights local water quality and how important local water quality is, not just to the Department of Environmental Protection, but to our local, you folks, the folks who are probably, your kids, your grandkids are going out and they're playing in the streams, they're tubing in the creek, like I did. They're looking for crayfish. Hopefully they're doing that. I really hope kids are doing that these days. But we want to make sure that our streams are healthy and safe, and that our kids don't get sick, and that we don't get sick whenever we're going in and we're fishing. We want to make sure that the fish we eat from those streams are safe to eat. And I think collaboratively, local government and DEP can really do a lot of really great work to make sure that we do have clean streams, not just for recreation, but also for property values. Having a dirty stream, an acid mine, I'm sure many of you have acid mine impacted streams in your localities. Cleaning those up will only bring back property values because of the recreation opportunities, and I think more and more people are really demanding that. So now I guess I have to talk about what I'm supposed to talk about. I wanted to at least mention that DEP is going through a huge permit modernization effort. So over the next 3 years, we will be redoing all of our IT systems. So our IT systems were developed in 1994. That's when they were rolled out, our main one, eFax. I know where I was in 1994. I think you guys could probably think about where you were. Pulp Fiction was the #1 movie. My personal favorite is Forrest Gump. But that was a long time ago, and that's the main system that we're using. And it's not really designed for a user experience. We also have about 600 different systems that layer over that main system. So our IT systems I usually describe as a spaghetti plate, and some things talk to some things and some things don't talk to some things, but it really makes it kind of difficult for not just us, but also for those folks who are trying to get a permit from the department or find out what is being permitted in their locality, in their community. So as we go through the next 3 years, it's going to be a massive undertaking, but it's something that we have to do. And we're really trying to design it with the user experience in mind. I know it's really shocking from a state agency that we're actually thinking about the person who has to use the system. But we are doing a lot of user experience testing, a lot of user experience surveys, just so we can understand what the needs are. So, I would really encourage you that if you folks have ideas, ideas and you have needs about how DEP can be, more transparent, how we can provide more information to you about permits and things that we're working on, we are certainly open we're all ears, open to hearing that. I do want to mention really quickly about some of our stormwater and other water programs that I know a lot of you deal with. We work very closely with a lot of local governments, not just townships, but other forms of municipalities, boroughs, cities. And we are working right now currently to revise our statewide general MS4 permit, so that's our stormwater permit. We held a series of 8 stakeholder work groups, and they consisted of some of those municipal MS4 permit holders, some of the collaboratives, the regional authorities, counties. We had nonprofit environmental organizations, consultants, academia, and the US EPA, which is actually where the mandate is. The mandate is from the United States Environmental Protection Agency. We just implement it. So we have invested a lot of time and resources to improve our statewide MS4 permit, and we've provided significant updates to the model stormwater ordinance that was developed, and that was also very largely stakeholder driven. So we're constantly taking feedback, taking ideas. So make sure, like I said, make sure you know who that local government liaison is for your area, and get to know them. They're actually really cool people. One of them saw me in the creek yesterday, and we had a great time. There are also more resources available to help implement some of these stormwater projects. We have Penvest. I don't know if many of you are familiar with that. Probably some of you are pretty familiar with Penvest. But we receive funding. We received a lot of funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law for the state revolving loan fund, and that is funding that feeds into Penvest. And Penvest provides funding for sewer projects, drinking water projects, wastewater projects, stormwater projects, and we're trying to get $1 billion out the door this year, and we're maybe halfway there. So if you folks have projects or you know of projects, definitely make sure that you reach out to Penvest. They also have a local person specific to the region that you live in, and they are incredibly helpful. They will walk you through the process and help you identify maybe some of the needs that you have and potential funding opportunities there. Overall, I just want to say, we're here to provide resources and help municipalities and local governments and your permittees better understand our permitting programs. We have a web-based training resource for some of you. Maybe some of your staff have already done some of these modules, but it's called the Pennsylvania Clean Water Academy. But you can go online and you can take specialized training right out of that academy. Really encourage you to do that if it's something that you folks are really looking at getting into more of within your local communities. We also have, let me skip through some of this because I want to make sure that I'm getting through what I want to say, and I'm already over time, I'm sure. Just want to give you an example of some great partnerships that we had with some local communities. We worked really closely with Cumberland Township and Adams County Conservation District to complete numerous stormwater BMP projects. We did a countywide action plan for the Chesapeake Bay. We had an implementation grant from the district, and we paid for the construction of 2 stormwater basin retrofits and local homeowners associations and 2 small rain gardens at the township municipal buildings. Cumberland Township continued this work with 2 stream restoration projects on the Rock Creek tributary and the Willoughby Run. And this restoration project is a prime example of our strong partnerships and how strong partnerships can really get stuff done. It showed innovation and sustained investments are creating incremental improvements toward the goal of restoring the local streams. We count on our local partners like you all to ensure that cleaner water and healthier soils are for Pennsylvanians. We have a lot of other programs that I think folks in here would be interested in. Our brownfields program, if you have a brownfield in your community that you want to see redeveloped, definitely reach out. We can help guide you or provide you with some options and opportunities. We also have a new program that's coming out through, it's called PETA, the Pennsylvania Energy Development Authority. It's an independent authority, but it's staffed by the department. But it's for, basically for energy efficient projects for municipalities. So it's called the MORE program. I forget what it stands for because we just create acronyms like I don't know what else. But basically what it is it's municipal governments that want to look at their buildings and their facilities, look at potentially putting some energy efficiency projects in or renewable energy projects. This is a program that you would be eligible for. So more information will be coming out on that very shortly. We are working with a contractor to develop that program and flesh it out. But, stay tuned, sign up for our press releases. You can do that through DEP's website. You won't get inundated. We don't send out a ton of press releases, maybe, I don't know, 5 a week. We don't. It's like maybe 2 or 3 a week. The most awkward part for me is that it hits my inbox and my face is on it, and it's just weird. Like that picture of me, like I've seen it everywhere, and it's a little jarring to see your face on what feels like everything. To walk into a building and see your face on it, it's odd. I had a lady say to me the other day, she's like, "You look so familiar." I'm like, "Do you work in the Rachel Carson building?" She's like, "Yes, I do." I'm like, "My face is on the wall, that's why." Just incredibly weird. But, this is a huge opportunity for me. I just want to, say again, thank you. Thank you to Sam Kressler for inviting me out to speak to you all. And I really hope that this is just the beginning of an open dialogue. And please, feel free to reach out through those local government liaisons. That's why we pay them. They are here for you. And we want to just make sure that together we can do what's best for the people and the environment of Pennsylvania. So thank you very much.
To this morning's forum. We're pleased to welcome a great panel of state lawmakers as part of the forum discussion on local issues and state issues and the partnerships that are so valuable for township officials in the Commonwealth.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the participants of this year's forum. Senator Rosemary Brown represents the 40th Senatorial District, which includes Lackawanna, Monroe, and Wayne counties. She is Majority Chair of the Senate Local Government Committee. She also serves on the Appropriations, Judiciary, Labor and Industry, Transportation, Urban Affairs and Housing, and Community, Economic and Recreational Development Committees.
A lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Senator Wayne Longerholk represents the 35th Senatorial District, which includes Cambria, Clearfield, and a portion of Center counties. A former Township Supervisor for Richland Township, Cambria County, he is Chair of the Transportation Committee and serves on the Appropriations, Judiciary, and Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committees. Representative Christina Sappi represents the 158th District in Chester County. She is Majority Chair of the Local Government Committee's Subcommittee on Townships and serves on the Tourism and Economic and Recreational Development, Agriculture and Rural Affairs, and Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committees. Representative Paul Takak represents the 82nd District in Center County. A former Township Councilman for College Township, Center County, he serves on the Agriculture and Rural Affairs, Education, Environmental Resources and Energy, Tourism, Economic and Recreational Development, and Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committees. Our moderator for this morning's forum is radio talk show host and crisis communications guru Dave Latour of Latour Communications. Latour previously served as press secretary for Pennsylvania Governor Mark Schweiker.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us, and thank you to the panel for joining us. I had planned to do the introductions, but we'll just dispense with those since they already did a great job doing them for us. So I've got a number of questions that were prepared by membership here. Some of them are fun, some of them are not. I just want to be very upfront with that. But let's start easy, and we'll start with Senator Brown. If each of you could take about a minute to introduce yourself and your priorities as a legislator.
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and what a nice introduction. I'm Senator Rosemary Brown. I have the 40th Senate District, which includes Monroe County, Lackawanna, and Wayne counties. And it's nice to see some of my members here from the townships in those districts last night. So I'm glad you're here. I hope it's been a productive week. And I am the Senate Majority Chair for local government. I did serve in the House of Representatives as a state representative for 12 years prior to coming to the Senate in 2022. And so, the experience has been very helpful in working with the townships. I think one of the things that I look at is the relationships that really need to happen between township supervisors, local government, and the state officials. They are very critical. And when I went from a state representative to a senator, there's a very big difference in the geography that you cover as a senator. And so getting to know all of your township supervisors, getting to know what the importance is for each township, borough, local municipality is extremely important, but it's difficult. So I would say as far as legislative priorities, I have a lot of them. The ones that mostly will fit your realm and your work, we'll talk about some of those as we go on. But my goal has always been with policy to say government can't do everything, but what can government do to set the environment, to set policies that help everything function to the best capacity that it can function, and be able to allow you to do the jobs the best that you can. So today is some feedback from us as far as what we are working on, but also feedback from you on some of the frustrations and concerns. So I'm happy to be here, and I would tell you, make sure you reach out both to your representatives and your senators and establish a very strong relationship. It's important from all levels of policy to being productive, and also for grants and anything else you might need, but to set those priorities up and know that we're pulled in many directions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Langerholtz.
Thank you. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm Senator Wayne Langerholtz. I represent the 35th Senatorial District, which is all of Cambria County, all of Clearfield County, and the western part of Center County, just to the west, everything west of State College Borough. It's good to be back. I was here as a township supervisor. I'd come to these for about 14 years. I was appointed way back as a young 20-year-old that didn't know much, but really got to learn a lot. And I credit a lot of my experience as a township supervisor in helping me to guide in my duties as a legislator. As I said, I'm also an attorney by trade. I was an assistant district attorney in Cambria County. I want to thank you for the invitation. Thank my former colleague, Bob Heffelfinger, who's on the PCN Executive Board. He's been a tremendous asset and was a great colleague. He's a good friend. But really, you know what politics is. I mean, politics does not get much more local than township supervisors. I mean, you know that. You're all in the room. People know where you live. You sit on your front porch and they know the decisions that you're making. And I think it is so important to have that background and to help guide me in legislation going forward. I started out actually working for the Richland Township Road Crew for several summers throughout college and before law school. So I really credit a lot of that experience in picking up grass bag clippings back when we still picked up grass bags and actually had to cut the bags open and dump them into a compost pile. I actually wrote a paper in college about that, which was interesting. But understanding that core function. What are my legislative priorities? I always say that government, you want core services, and really it doesn't get much more core than the local level of townships. You want a good road to drive on, you want good schools to send your kids to, police, fire protection. I mean, it doesn't get much more core than that, and I kind of use that as my guiding post, as we go through our legislative terms here in Harrisburg. And as far as legislative priorities is to ensure that our municipalities, we're fairly represented. And as chair of the Transportation Committee, there is A lot involved with transportation. Transportation touches everyone in some capacity, one way or another, every day. And my goal is legislatively to ensure that transportation funding is adequately done, and at the same time that understanding that the needs and not putting too much burden on local townships that you represent. It's easy, I think, sometimes for people that may be in Harrisburg that sit behind a desk that don't really know the impact that it has on the dollar amounts. And some townships are very, very small and are really, really hamstrung with budgets and tight constraints. And my goal always in looking at that is, what is the effect on our local municipalities? Because ultimately that gets back to, your constituents, my constituents, the tax base, and ensuring that it's fairly done. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's good to be back.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Seppi?
Good morning. It's wonderful to be here with you. This is my first time at the PSATS convention, and I'm thrilled to be here. I represent a beautiful district in southeastern Pennsylvania, and I see some of my township supervisors here, and I'm thrilled to see you guys here. I was a staffer for 3 legislators before I ran for office, and this is my 3rd term in the House of Representatives. And as we said, I'm on the Local Government Committee and also the Local Government Commission, which I think you understand, does a lot of, deep diving research on local government issues and how we can impact them in the long term. So I'm really proud of the work that the commission does, and pleased to lend my assistance there. So I never had a role in local government myself, but the people that I served in the legislature prior to running for office were on the local government committee, and that's, I think, where I got a lot of my background. I also was a stay-at-home mom for many years, and I think that's also where I learned the importance of participating in your local government. And as the senator said, it really doesn't get more personal than local government. You are you're in the trenches. You are the first line of government that our residents and our citizens meet every single day. And your institutional knowledge that you bring to your jobs is absolutely critical to the success of our townships. And one of the things I've seen in my years as a staff person and as a representative now is how huge this state is. I think we take that for granted. This is an enormous state, and we have major regional differences and major regional challenges. So what is a massive challenge or a massive success in southeastern Pennsylvania can be a major difference and challenge in northeastern Pennsylvania. And I think we'll probably touch on transportation today. I'm sure we will. It's something.
I bet we will.
I bet we will. It's something we all share. It's one of our biggest challenges in the Commonwealth, and how it's treated throughout the different regions is I think, one of our biggest challenges in Pennsylvania. So, in terms of my legislative priorities, I think breaking down the silos of government so that our agencies work together to make things a little bit smoother and more efficient and more cost-effective for local governments and ultimately for our taxpayers is one of the most important things we can do. And so whenever I see an opportunity to get human services and education together to address a problem, I think that's something we need to do. Whenever we can get the local government commission and committees and transportation together to fix a problem, I think that's something we need to do. So I'm always looking for that intersection, no pun intended, of where issues meet each other, because when we're just cherry picking at solutions, we're not really looking at a long-term fix. And so that's how I approach these problems. And again, I'm thrilled to be here and look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, Representative. And finally, Representative Takak.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, that's a little loud. Yeah, good morning. Just a couple of years ago, I was sitting in your seats as well as a local township supervisor. I came to politics, I guess, rather late in life. I did many things before running for public office. And most recently, I spent over 20 years working in educational technology, and I work with school districts all over the Commonwealth. So I had the opportunity, the privilege to drive around. And by the way, there are 500 school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which is a little crazy. But at one point or another, I've probably been in every single one of them. And in having those conversations, I mean, schools reflect communities. So I got to see an awful lot of things that I felt could be improved in terms of how state, local, federal governments all work to help empower communities and build communities in schools as well. So education's always been a real important thing to me. And then a few years ago, I had the opportunity to run for local government. And I was elected to College Township Council. And some of you may know the district that I cover. There's a little school there called Penn State. And that's part of my district. But then it also extends into the northern part of Center County. And I don't know if many of you have been up in places like Snowshoe and the Mountaintop or Bald Eagle State Park, but they're very rural communities. And so I really like that the district that I was eventually elected to reflects that diversity of Center County. It gives me a real opportunity to kind of build bridges across the aisle, across different demographics. It's really been a privilege. So I worked in local government, and I really saw that the experiences that I had in terms of being able to find common ground, to work and craft solutions. I've always been a lifelong learner. I joke that if I'm not learning a dozen new things every day, I'm not doing my job. And I just love that part of taking that experience that I had and putting it to work for the common good and for my community. And so I'm trying to bring that same attitude to my work in the state legislature. As many of my colleagues will attest, I have an attitude of let's find some common ground, let's get some things done. I think that's particularly important in this moment in our society and in our nation, where there are so many forces driving us apart, that I really think it's important to try and work hard to find common ground. I represent everybody, whether they voted for me or not. And so I'm really dedicated to that kind of a spirit. And so that, I believe, is reflected in my legislative and budget priorities. I'm really looking forward to trying to help solve the education funding crisis that we quite honestly have in this Commonwealth. We've put so much burden on local taxpayers, and it's unfair and it's inequitable, and we have to focus on that. But I also really believe that we need to make investments. My business background tells me that we need to make investments. We need to make investments in local communities, and we need to empower local economies, because really that's what drives our economy, and that's what I think we've kind of gotten away from. So, without getting into too many details, I'm sure we'll get into those, but I see the opportunity to sit in this chair as a temporary opportunity to do good work, to build some bridges, and hopefully get a lot of good things done. And I do try to bring that background as a local elected official, where people do know where you live, and they come knock on your door when they're not happy with you. Kind of bring that same sense of spirit to the state legislature. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you this morning.
Thank you, Representative. You talked about common ground, and I think that's a great place to start, because what we're going to do in the next however long we have is just try and find common ground on a lot of these issues. So I'll start with you, Representative. What can the state legislature do to rein in department regulations that are not subject to any legislative oversight and often create burdensome and costly mandates on townships?
Yeah, so, going back to Schoolhouse Rock, there's different functions in government. I think people sometimes lose sight of the fact that, the legislature, our mandate, our authority is to create legislation, to pass legislation in concert with the governor, and to craft and pass the budget. Enforcement of those laws really falls to the administration. So, I think a lot of times, while we can interface with the different agencies, whether that's, DEP or DCNR, the whole acronym soup of agencies. They're charged with enforcing the legislation that we've passed or implementing the programs that we have funded. So, I think working in concert together, and let's be real, I mean, you don't pass rules for people who tend to follow them. You pass rules for people who tend to want to skirt them. That's just a reality, and you know this with your ordinances and everything else. For people who want to do the right thing, want to be good neighbors, you don't pass ordinances for them. So, I think a lot of times we might characterize something as mandates when actually they're standards or maybe they're responsibilities. I'm not saying that there aren't some that are unreasonable, but I think we need to begin to engage and say, okay, why are we setting these standards, and why do we think that it's your responsibility to impose or to take care of or be responsible for these opportunities. I'm not articulating it properly, but I do think we need to look at it from that standpoint. And the other truism is that every level of government thinks the next one up should be doing more.
Right.
That's just human nature, right? Townships think counties should be doing more, counties think states should be doing more, and we think the federal government should be doing more. So, I think the challenge, and I hope I'm answering the question properly, but I think it's about communication, and it's about looking at these as how are we best implementing the legislation and the budget priorities that have been passed.
Senator Brown, I'll pose the same question to you, and don't worry, these are long questions, so I'll reread them. What can the state legislature do to rein in department regulations that are not subject to any legislative oversight and often create burdensome and costly mandates on townships?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is identify them. And as I said, initially in my opening comments, we identify them with your help. And so having that communication again to say this is a problem, this is what we need to do, we have to identify where those problems are. And once we identify them as the legislature, we may have to go into it as a legislative body and be able to go after it in some fashion that can help either reduce that regulation or change that regulation or do something that would then be in the legislative process. It's not always easy because of our authority. We might have to change some of that. But, there's ways to effectuate change. So I think no matter what the situation is, no matter what the problem is, the first step is identifying it, speaking up and saying, what's the situation with this? Why do I have this problem in my local township? And why can't I get past a certain point? And then it's up to us to research why at the state level or at the federal level, whatever that may be, the situation and where it's at. And then it's to the next stage of what are the options to go after this? And that's what part of being a legislator is as far as problem solving and being creative on the approaches that we need to help you be able to function better.
Thank you. Representative Sappi, I'm going to move to a new question. With municipalities across the state facing an EMS crisis, would you support amending the Municipal Authorities Act to allow municipalities to enter multi-municipal authorities that suit their region?
So short answer would be yes. Right. I'm on the Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee, and we've been working on this issue for a couple of years now, and we realize what a crisis this is for our municipalities. And it's impacted my family personally. Having a personal health crisis in my family and not being able to rely on EMS to get there in time, and personally driving the family member 40 minutes away to an emergency room where they were then transported to a trauma center. So we're listening to all sides of this. I know some of our municipalities are already doing studies to see how they can collaborate and do work together on EMS. I know, and they're doing the same thing with fire. But I really do believe that decision needs to be made at the local level, and we can, at the state level, empower them, make it optional if that's something that they think they can do.
Thank you. I'll pose the same question to you, Senator Langerholtz. I'll reread it. With the municipalities across the state facing an EMS crisis, would you support amending the Municipal Authorities Act to clarify that municipalities can enter multi-municipal EMS authorities that suit their region?
Yes.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you.
And actually, in the Senate, we did have our colleague Senator Baker has a bill permitting that, and I voted for that. And that's, I mean, something that we hear about. I hear about everywhere that I go within the district, and just the numbers that are down so significantly. And it's one of those core functions of government, I see it as, and that I talked about a little bit earlier in my opening, that, God forbid something happens, you pick up the phone, you expect someone to be there. And hearing the numbers that are down, it's very concerning. And that is something, quite frankly, in my opinion, that we should be spending money on to support. I mean, that is an essential and core function of government. And dealing with first responders and EMS, going back to my time as a Township Supervisor, I think I was appointed for about a month. And my colleague probably knows exactly where I'm going. There was a 3 fire station merger going on, or 3 different fire stations coming together, and that was, to put it mildly, quite contentious. But it's just that changing demographic. The numbers that are down so significantly that EMS, firefighting, first responders are forced to do so much more with so much less. So anything we can do to help to make their jobs easier, we have a duty to do, in my opinion.
Following up on that thought, Senator Langerholtz, municipalities can only levy a 0.5 mil EMS tax without a referendum. Should the state look at increasing that cap or even removing it altogether?
I think that's something that we could look at, allowing, I've always been a strong proponent of local control and letting you as supervisors to set, the framework to set what you can fit, or what you feel fits best within your township. So I think that's something absolutely we can take a look at.
Senator Brown, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there is, a lot of conversation in regards to this. So you're able to go, to 0.5 mils without a voter referendum. So that becomes the question, do you take that off, that cap, and then raise that up and still not have to do a voter referendum, right? So you go into a lot of those conversations with, there's definitely a need for the funding piece, but then you go into the other conversation of what the normal constituent is dealing with tax levels from county to school taxes to, inflationary issues and all of that. So you have this struggle between both. The needs there, and when you call 911, which was spoken before, you expect that ambulance to show up and the fire. So it's critical. I think there is a proposal that will be coming out for that in the Senate very shortly. I did do 3 bills this past week through my committee that took the cap off at least how you can use your money right now. That you can, you're only able to usually use it for 50% of personnel. Now the cap is lifted, that you have some flexibility there. It's not into law yet, but it did pass through the committee, and I hope to see that move forward. But these are difficult conversations, and I just wanted to add, is there anybody from Pike County in here today? I used to have Pike. Right, so Pike County was part of my state representative district, and they have created a approach with the municipal matching program, the county. And so the county has put a line item in for their EMS, and then they would have a matching program to the municipalities that joined. And I think maybe 12 out of 13, or almost all of them, are part of it because they wanted to increase their EMS and deal with the problem that they were having. So there's some creative solutions out there, but we definitely have a lot of work to do here. But it is finding the money, and is money the only answer? I think there might be some other issues with providers and things like that are also. So again, keep the communication going with us, and we'll try to get as much done as we can, piece by piece, to try to help things function well.
Representative take act. Well, we'll get to it. Yeah,
Sure.
We'll make sure everybody answers it.
Yeah, no, this is something that I chaired the Public Safety Committee in the Center region. My son is also a paramedic, full disclosure. But one of the challenges we have, particularly in rural areas, is just simply distance. And so looking at reimbursement rates from mile one and some of those things will really help, make sure that our providers can stay solvent. But, back to the regional thing, it is a regional service now, right? Because if somebody can't cover a call, then it rolls over to the next call, and at mutual aid, it rolls over to the next call. And many times when you pick up the phone, it's not a question of if somebody will show up, but it's how long, when. And I think we have to look at this regionally. Now, certainly in north central Pennsylvania, there's a lot of folks who travel through there. Maybe they come for vacation, or they have camps, or they're traveling the interstates. And I think the presumption is that they're carrying their local services with them, right? I cover, my district includes 30 miles of I-80 that runs through Center County. Heaven forbid something should happen on I-80. It's my local fire companies and EMS providers that are coming to help. And we need to look at this, I believe, more comprehensively. We need to look at this as, look, this isn't just a you problem or a them problem, it's a we problem, because, we are all kind of in the same boat. So I think we have to look at this a little bit more comprehensively. To the Senator's point, I do believe in local control, but, we're responsible for public health, safety, and welfare. And, I think we need to look at this comprehensively and try and do what's right. But the expectation should be that somebody's going to show up, they're going to be well-trained, they're going to be well-equipped, and they're going to take good care of you. So what do we need to do to make that happen?
Representative Sappi?
I agree with everything that's been said, and I think it just goes back to the regional differences that we have in this state. So anything that we do work on in the state needs to recognize that, and recognize that your township and your county better than some of us bureaucrats at the state level. And so any solution that we come up with has to factor in, I believe, options. So something to opt into. So if townships, if we give more flexibility to counties, do townships have the desire to opt into something that the county would be providing or funding, or do they say no? Our folks are in the Southeast, we have huge property taxes. We have tremendous infrastructure costs. It's a high cost of living, and so I think there may be some hesitation to go to voter referendum and ask for more. So I think that's where it really needs to be something that our local level has the option to change.
Let me stay with you, Representative Sappi, if I could. Volunteer fire is also facing a similar crisis. Everybody nods because we all know it. What can the state do to help with the recruitment of volunteer firefighters?
We talk about this a lot in the Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee. I'm concerned that sometimes we are nibbling around the edges of this issue and not really giving it the attention and the funding that it really needs. Because, again, in the Southeast, the cost of living is so high. We cannot get volunteer firefighters who are young and fit and able to respond to an incident that can pay, the rent or a mortgage in Chester County. And so can we pay them to come from Lancaster County into our county? And it's just, the cost of living issue is a huge problem for getting firefighters. So I don't know if it's something that, we look at and go, we're going to pay for paid firefighting. I have one fire company that has just taken the bull by the horns and is paying 2 full-time firefighters to stay on staff.
As a voluntary department?
Yes, because they realize that we're going to take too long, and the impact is on our communities. Our communities are growing, our boroughs are growing in the Southeast, and so the level of incidences are going up, and if they don't have the firefighters, they're going to be in trouble. So they do a lot of fundraising, but I don't think that's fair either. You can't chicken dinner your way out of this issue.
Right. Thank you. Senator Langerholtz, same question for you. What can the state do to help recruit volunteer firefighters?
Yes, this has been an issue for some time, and it's not going away. And each year that we go by, we lose more volunteer firefighters. And it's something that came out of Senate Resolution 6, I think, a couple of years ago, that we were able to implement and act to then get some things in place. And they are in place, and I think we can maybe measure that here within the coming year to see the impact that it has. But that's a starting point, quite frankly, and it's such a core service. Again, I'll get back to that, and it always amazed me to go to the annual fire department banquet, and they'd give out the awards, and they would call out the top 10 who made the most calls on that, and it's in the hundreds. I mean, it's like 2 or 3 calls a day for some of these people, and that is a volunteer service.
Right.
And to think, what would that be if you quantified that or had to put that burden on you further as a paid department? It's tremendous, it's astronomical. I mean, it's a game changer. So that's something that absolutely deserves our attention, that we need to advocate and allocate state dollars and resources to in whatever capacity, whatever different areas that we've implemented, different incentives to get volunteer firefighters back, tuition, different types of tax breaks or things of that nature. All these little things can add up, but also I think we need to take a long, hard look at furthering the mission of Senate Resolution 6 and implementing more dollars to that essential service.
Let me hopscotch your representative.
Yeah, just to echo what the senator and representative said, I mean, there are incentives, right? So there's tax incentives, there's some things that we can do to help attract people. We can get into the local schools and expose students to that. But just like schools reflect the health of our local communities, I think volunteer fire departments and EMS services are kind of reflecting the health of our communities as well, as particularly from an economic standpoint. The representative pointed out, most people, between trying to rush to cover childcare and cover 2 jobs, there just isn't as much time for people to be available. I have one rural company, they worked a fire a couple of months ago. The average age on that rig was 60 years old, the average age. So, we need this infusion of young people, but we also need to keep them in the community. I mean, I see so many times that, our rural communities are aging. That means young people are moving out, and they don't have the opportunity to come back and stay and contribute to their communities in the way that they used to. So, I think it's a very comprehensive, I think it's sort of a warning light of the overall health of the community. And so we can do some of these things that are specifically targeted, but I think we have to look at the whole impact on the community as well.
Senator Brown, thoughts?
Pretty much agree. I think the training requirements, the cost of equipment, the cost of trucks, everything has escalated to a point where it's very difficult for the volunteer forces to keep going. I have been looking at a draft of doing a stronger tax credit for recruitment and retention of firefighters. They can get something now from you. It's what, $300, $400 at tops. And I think something much more significant is needed for, a partner in a household to say, that's great. You do your volunteer firefighting, that's wonderful, and we get a great benefit from that. And it needs to be significant. It does need to come from the state level. And so I think it's at this point where, I'm sort of evaluating how to do that, where to get the money, what that amount would be. But there would have to be a service requirement where someone would serve for, a certain amount of years before they were eligible, so that we have that, commitment, maybe 3 years, 4 years, and then you can start to get the tax incentive. But I think, the litigious world has made this very hard also, because when you look at trying to reduce the training requirements, you want your volunteer firefighter to be trained well. You want to keep them safe. But, to reduce those requirements is very hard, but that's often asked of us, that these training requirements are too much for a volunteer firefighter. So I think we are narrowing down some of that, but I think, as Senator Langerholtz said, the cost of a change to our firefighter system would be tremendous for the taxpayer. Tremendous. And we're very lucky that the volunteer force has worked so well for so long. So I do think we need to try our best to maintain and recruit. And anybody on the fire departments here, it's a family. It's in the blood. The EMS stuff is in the blood, and you want to do it. But sometimes you just can't do it if the financials and the time and everything else doesn't work. So I am looking at something more significant on a piece of legislation for that.
Thank you. So you'll be shocked to learn there's concern in this room about unfunded mandates, right?
Those stickers?
Yeah, the little stickers. Here's the question. The legislature will not pass any bill affecting the state budget that does not include a state fiscal impact note. Shouldn't the state also require a local fiscal impact note when it impacts local governments? And I'll just throw that out to whoever wants to answer it first. I mean, I would love to answer this question myself, personally.
I think any fiscal note is important.
Right.
You know, whether it's required or not, I think that that's just common sense. You know, it's sort of asking the who, what, when, where, why, and how of what you do. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I'm not quite sure I understand the question of how it would be mandated at the local level. Like, is that from us or the local level doing it? But I think a fiscal note in any public service position is very important to know.
Senator Langerholtz?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question and an interesting approach, but I would say further that I'd like to think that there is some type of an impact for the local fiscal note through your association. That's why it's so important that you're here gathering with PZATs and have such a strong association with this organization that really is very involved in helping us to guide legislation. So if there's something out there that is going to have a tremendous impact, while it may not be exactly dollar cents and all townships are going to be different, at least it's so important to come here to make your voice known, because I rely heavily on PZATs in helping guide my legislation and the way that I vote on certain things.
As a former print reporter, this question really interests me. Newspaper circulation is declining. A lot of towns are without local papers. In fact, some of us know the Center Daily Times is now down to 2 days of a print edition. Municipalities are still faced with print legal advertising requirements. Not only are they expensive, many residents don't even see them. What are the obstacles, or can we modernize advertising requirements to simply include electronic and social media? I'll start with you. Well, Representative Sappi, you're nodding, so.
Sure.
Yes.
I will try to.
Because I've heard this from both sides, and I feel your pain on this issue, because I think it impacts, again, it goes back to that regional thing. It's expensive. And I think we've tried to change that regulation to go all digital so that you can utilize digital advertising and notification on your websites for any public meetings, et cetera, anything that needs to be sunshined to go that route. Unfortunately, there are still parts of the state that have very inconsistent and unreliable broadband connection. They don't have internet. We have an aging population that is we still have a digital divide. And so this is one of these things that we are definitely working towards. We're not getting there fast enough, but it does take time. And so I think as we roll out better broadband connection across the state and increase that infrastructure, you're going to see this go the way of the dinosaur. It will go away. I'm sorry, it's not going away fast enough.
Representative Takak, I'll repeat that question. What are the obstacles to modernizing township advertising requirements to include electronic and social media? Is there a solution there?
Well, you mentioned Center Daily Times.
Right.
I mean, that's directly affecting, our townships and the ones I represent. We're all for transparency in government. That's what this is about. It's about making sure that the folks who have a stake in what we do or what you do know what you're doing, right? So the intention is right, but the challenge, as the representative said, is, I come from a tech background, and we always talk about, having to deal with the lowest common denominator, in a sense. And there's plenty of folks, I knock on their door, I talk to them at events, the only thing they do is read the paper or watch TV. They don't necessarily have, broadband connections, or they don't spend any time on the internet. They may not even have an email address or anything. So we have to make sure that we're taking care of those folks. Maybe we can modify. There's a lot of weekly publications in our area that reach a great number of people. Maybe we extend the, time frames. I know that sometimes slows things down a little bit, but we have to make sure that we're bringing everybody along. And, I think we're in a transitional period here that we do have to cast the net widely, but I think with that mindset of we're trying to increase transparency, we're trying to increase accountability, how do we best do that? And with your help, we can make sure that we're reaching the most people in the most effective way.
Senator Brown, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I absolutely like this legislation. And the one thing that I like about it too, and I think both representatives are right, that as we do broadband and as we get across the state where everybody has more internet access, that'll play a significant role. But the legislation does have a may parameter in it. So it does give flexibility to reduce the reporting requirement. So I really do like the legislation. I think if you want to do it as a township, you can do it and reduce your costs. If you can't do it and you feel it's a rural area and maybe you're not there yet, you have that option. But unfortunately, as was mentioned, there is still and it's bipartisan. There's still a mix of legislators that don't support it. And it is across both sides of the aisle. So we're not there yet. But I have to say one of the pieces of legislation that I think will help us even get there also on top of the broadband is Senator Ahmet has a piece of legislation with the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee where actually doing a study, not a long study, we all love studies, right? And they sit on somebody's desk somewhere, but a quick study to say, what are the actual cost impacts of this in advertising? Because I do have to say, I have asked counties, I have asked townships, and I get a roundabout number, but I don't always get the exact number. And you want to be able to say those facts of exactly what this is. And I know there's a number that's thrown around, but having those numbers from an agency that's done the report, it's legit, that will help us move this forward. So that's a good piece of legislation. And I also think Senator Ahmet and Senator Kristen Phillips-Hill, I have some notes here, they have another piece of legislation that if the advertisement shows up in the newspaper, on the bottom, it would have to say how much that advertisement costs the taxpayer.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a little push, right? A little push. Right. And I think that's where, when we go, and I go back to my opening comments saying, trying to create the environment for you so that you can function, it goes back to saying, hey, listen, let's let you keep as much money as you can to work with. And let's make sure it works for you. So I am a big advocate of this legislation. I'm going to be realistic and tell you it's not ready yet to move forward, but it's getting there, and there's some pushes all around to try to get it moving.
Do you want to address Senator Langerholtz?
Yeah, and it's a cost. It's a cost that is borne by your residents, and really, for a lot of the municipalities, a lot of townships, that's a real significant impact. And look, call me old-fashioned. I mean, there's nothing I like more than getting up in the morning with a cup of coffee and actually having that physical print. And it's gone now. You're looking at your iPad. I mean, I still pay my bills. I write out checks and mail it. My staff thinks I'm nuts. But I mean, there's something that, call me old-fashioned, but that's, but unfortunately, every day you gotta say every day you pick up the paper. Not really, Right. Every day you pick up your iPad, you see another newspaper going digital. But it's something that we need to evolve with, and you don't ever want to become complacent, but you need to realize there's some good legislation out there that really will help to impact what you're paying on a bottom line. I don't know what percentage it is. I'm sure it varies township to township, but some townships have smaller budgets. That's a big hit that they have. So looking forward to seeing how this evolves and to help our townships.
We come back to you, Senator Brown, following up on that. States' right to know law. There's several folks that are concerned that the right to know law, while well-intended and certainly supportive of everybody's desire for transportation, some businesses are taking advantage of this free service meant for transparency by submitting voluminous requests that end up taking up a lot of taxpayer time, dollars, and research to satisfy those right-to-know requests. Could there be any reforms on the horizon that would help stabilize those costs or help local municipalities deal with these requests?
Yeah, so it's often referred to as the beautiful word vexatious, I think, right? Is that how you say it, vexatious? Which is, the intention really be frivolous or to not have any justification and just sort of cause you havoc. And there is a piece of legislation Senator Dush has that I believe moved through the Senate, and that would require or allow for a petition to the Office of Open Records that would then say, listen, this one is, really causing us havoc, causing us money, causing us time, and it's a frivolous type of thing. And it would go through the process. And then there would be that opportunity for, somebody who is abusing the system to be, for 1 year, not able to do a right to know request. And so that becomes something that is, a process. It does take a little bit of time to get there through the Office of Open Records, and it does take a little time for it to say, hey, you're abusing the system, you're abusing taxpayer money, you're abusing for whatever reason you want to get back at somebody or something like that. It's meant to be a transparency tool. It's not meant to be abused. So I do think there's a possibility. I think that hopefully will be running in the House, hopefully, shortly.
Representative Sappi, thoughts on that?
I totally agree. I mean, I think anybody that's abusing the system should be hitting up against a wall. And it would take some time for folks to figure that out in the Office of Open Records, but I think anything that we can do to stop that, because it's our local governments are small. Like, you don't have huge staffs, you don't have a lot of budget for paper, for instance, to print out these documents. I mean, and even just to email documents. I mean, it's very, they're huge documents that take a long time to upload and get out. So I think anything that we can do to make that fair.
Representative Takak?
Just real quickly, I agree with everything that's been said. I go back to, this is about transparency and accountability. There are, not anybody in this room, but there are folks who might want to delay or not come through with right to know requests. So we need to make sure that there are safeguards in there for really legitimate requests. We're dealing with some issues in my district where, I do think that there are some legitimate requests that we need to make sure are enforced as well. So, I think we see both sides, but if we set the goal of transparency and accountability, that's what this is designed to do. It's not meant for, I'll introduce another word, Senator, harassment, right? So vexatious harassment, either one of those work.
Here's the fun question, Senator Langerholtz. Just teeing you up.
Should we move that?
Why does PennDOT get $8 billion a year to maintain 40,000 miles of road, while townships get less than $500 million annually to oversee 77,000 miles of road? It's almost like a high school math question.
Well, that's why I went to law school. So I can answer that question. That's in that figure too. I think there are a lot more costs, and not just for the straight administration of the roads. There's a lot of administrative costs. But again, I mean, really, there's too much government. I mean, quite honestly, there's too much bureaucracy. And we've taken steps in the Senate in introducing legislation to kind of look at different funding formulas, to look at different requirements. One example that just sticks out, whenever the Turnpike, I had a bill that the Turnpike Commission should not have to go through some of these permit requests and things that PennDOT isn't required to do. Just to kind of, you get too involved in too much bureaucracy, and that number really does deal with a lot of other administrative costs, front staff, back staff, whatever, in addition to just the straight, dollar for dollar road costs. But again, that's something that we deal with every year. I have the pleasure of sitting on the Appropriations Committee, and every year we get every department before us. And to date, I've been in 8 years. I haven't had a department tell me, you gave us too much money last year. We're going to give you some back. Unfortunately, so I'm still waiting for that day. Maybe it'll come. I don't know. But that's part of our job as well, is to rein this back and not just spend and be actually fiscally responsible, like each one of you are every year with your budget. I can remember sitting down as a township supervisor, around budget time, and we had they passed out pieces of paper and pencils, and we would sit there and literally, and we talk about nickel and dime, we would write it in a pencil, and it would evolve. We'd meet the next week, and we'd erase a little bit, write it in a pencil. So that's kind of the mantra that I go with, in guiding me here, and that's what we need to do at the state level. It's not lost on me. I remember, I think there's the first year that I was in the Senate, and we're sitting there talking about I don't even remember what we were talking about budget-wise, but talking about money, and somebody made the comment in the room, well, it's only $10 million. I remember thinking. But when you're talking about the budget that we have,
right.
So, and I say this when I speak to schools, last year's budget was $45 billion. Like, how much money is that? Really, you think about that. So I'd ask, students, well, how much money do you think that is? That's a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. I said, you could go back to 1900, January 1st, 1900, and from that day to this day, every day spend $1 million, and you'd be right at about $45 billion. Just to kind of quantify how much money is there. So it's our duty. You send me to Harrisburg to guard those dollars and to make sure they're spent fairly and efficiently. That's what I'll continue to try to do.
Representative Takak, here are the numbers. $8 billion for 40,000 miles of roads, townships less than $500 million for 77,000 miles of road.
Yeah, if you only look at those two factors, but I think there's another one. I go back to algebra. There's an A and a B, and then also a C. I'm not going to get too deep into it. Traffic counts, and if you look at many of our rural roads, they're pretty lightly trafficked. Many of them. We have this concept of feeder roads, connectors, thoroughfares. I think we have to look at traffic counts and those kind of things as well. So I think it's a great number and a great statistic, but we also have to look at usage and safety and some of those other things, the maintenance costs. We certainly deal with, in my district, an influx of cars for big events called Penn State football games or other things. We need to make sure that the state roads are safe and well maintained and those kind of things. A lot of times it's easy to frame things in a particular way, but I'm not defending or discounting anything that the senator said. I think all of that is true, but I think we also have to look comprehensively at the mileage and the number of cars and the safety features as well.
Okay, jump on this one. This was a popular question at last year's panel. Why do municipalities have the responsibility to maintain every single traffic light in the state, even at the intersection of two state-owned roads? Who wants to answer that question?
I don't know. You want to do it, Mr. Sargent? Mr. Chairman.
It falls on me, de facto, as Chair of Transportation. But that is within a PennDOT reg. And again, that goes back to your earlier question on how can we help some regulations. And one answer for that would be to urge our colleagues in the House to pass Senate Bill 1, which we sent over there, which deals with some of the regulations across different departments. So, that's one instance. But again, it's the state and different departments that are pushing that off onto the townships.
Right.
And I know, and I can remember my time on the Board of Supervisors, it infuriated me that we were responsible for the stormwater from state roads that were coming in that we had to deal with that. So this is nonsensical. Why are we in the business of taking care of their issue with their roads? So that's another part of the problem that we need to address. We can do it. There's some legislation out there. If we can hint, get that passed in the House, we can get that to the governor, get it signed, and maybe that'll help as well, and that can be a regulation we can look at.
Okay. Representative Sappy, new question. Liquid fuel allotments continue to decline. Both the House and Senate have introduced legislation to charge fees on EVs, electric vehicles. What is the likelihood that something like that gets done this year, fees for EVs?
I think there's broad support for that. I think it's fair. Does it get done this year? We may need a little bit more time, just honestly.
Yeah.
Thoughts, Senator? Thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think so too. I think Chairman Langerholtz has been involved in some of this and has a great deal of knowledge. I'm on the Transportation Committee, but I do know that this has gone back and forth and, what that dollar amount is and then different proposals that are out there. So I'm going to kick it off to Chairman Langerholtz.
Totally kicked it to you.
I'm glad this is a
Isn't that
question
nice?
that I love
like
to.
this?
I love that. I'll take it too.
I'm happy to answer this. So actually, how many people in this room, and I ask this all the time, have an electric vehicle? Anybody? Show of hands. Wow. So you got about three people. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's the response that I get when I ask that question across the board. But what we did, and we crafted it, my colleague and I, Senator Rothman has the bill, which puts it at, talking about this issue, when we started to have hearings on this issue, talk about how do we best address this, because there are electric vehicles that are rising. I think it was in 2019, there were about 9,000 electric vehicles statewide. Now there's over 65,000. So, I mean, it's going to continue to go up. So, as sure as you ask the question, how should we address an electric vehicle fee, you would get 50 different answers on the best way to do it. So, when we ultimately, we came to it as an approach of a starting point. I wanted to do something, number one, that would have an impact. Number two, that wasn't overly regulatory or dealing with the government, because just as we could say we're going to do this and provide all these different options, the next thing you know, PennDOT would say, well, we have to create a new department now for that, and we have to hire these many people for that to administer this. So I said, let's do it as simple as we can, but do it fairly and do it in an equitable manner. So the number that we settled on was a $290 registration fee. And the way that we got at that was to take the average of, say you're driving about 12,000 miles the average person drives a year, and then equate that down to what you're paying in a gas tax, because that's what funds the motor license fund, and that is a huge component of PennDOT's funding. So when you boil that all down to what that means, you're paying about 50, 60 cents per gallon to the PA gas tax. So how do we equate that? That's how we got to that number, the $290 per year to equate that. And at that point, it would raise about, I think it will raise about $15 million. But the mechanism that's in place now is the alternative fuels tax. So if you have an electric vehicle, you three people that have electric vehicles in this room know that you have to pay that and submit that to the Department of Revenue. And I've told this story before, bear with me if you've heard it. I was speaking at some transportation symposium a couple years ago, and I asked that question: how many people have electric vehicle? One person raised their hand, and I said, well, he knows he has to pay that alternative fuels tax, and he's like shaking his head. And I knew the guy actually. He's like, yeah. Well, then after the symposium, he came up to me and said, hey, what's this alternative fuels tax that I have to pay? So, I mean, that's part of the problem as well. It's self-reporting. There's money that's being left on the table every day that we fail to act. We sent that bill over, and I've been back and forth with Chairman Nielsen on this issue a bunch. Their proposal in the House was $120, and then get to the $290 within, I don't even know how many years it is, but quite frankly, we need to act on this issue. We're leaving money on the table, and I think that number is fair, and it's something that we need to address, because that's going to help the motor license fund. Every day we're losing money in that motor license fund, and that goes to critical infrastructure, roads and bridges. So I don't ever want to guarantee anything or make percentages, but I feel pretty confident that hopefully we'll get this resolved here. We have to. Quite frankly, we have to.
Real quick, Representative
30 seconds. I'll be real quick. I think there's broad support for some sort of a fee, but back to fairness, if you drive an F-250 or you drive a Prius, you're paying very different rates by the number of gallons that you pay for in a year. I think we already have a mechanism whereby you report your mileage when you register your vehicle. I think doing this proportionally by miles driven is actually a much more fair way to do it. I think if we take that into account, I think we can get this done.
Okay, last question. You got a little less than 5 minutes, and this is for everybody. Start with you, Representative Sappi. Would you consider using some of the federal EV funding to ensure our local fire companies are properly equipped to deal with EV car fires?
Yes, I would be. And I mean, I think that money should, I think that money should be going to the fire companies regardless, but, because I think the EV fires, if there's 3 people in this room,
Right.
I think, I know we have a lot of EVs in our area, in the
Sure.
southeast. So I think it comes back to like where that need is.
Well said. Senator Brown, your thoughts. Would you consider using some of the federal EV funding to ensure our local fire companies are properly equipped to deal with EV car fires?
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. I've had it come up several times on dealing with this, the cost of dealing with it, even again back to the training on how to deal with it for a safety standpoint for our fire departments. And I would just have to look a little bit more at those numbers of what that federal number is, and what that means, how much would come back. And it might be a percentage of that. But I think I would definitely be in favor of looking at that.
Representative?
Yeah, training overall, we put this back in the context of just supporting our local fire companies. The training requirements, the expectation of expertise. I think we need to do a better job of being able to fund training overall, and this certainly falls into that category. How we do it, that's I think the question. I think everybody agrees.
Senator?
Yes, 100%. I think that just creates, you talk about electric vehicles and the ancillary impact they're going to have on your townships. That is just a tremendous, or can be a tremendous drain on your local fire companies. When you're talking about, there's places, I think in California, that they build water tanks. You have to submerge these cars in the water to let the battery burn out, or special blankets that you can put on these vehicles that then, I don't know if there's another use you can do, or if it's a one-time. Those are costs that add up over time. So absolutely, that money should be going there. And I've actually spoken to people within the industry that question the federal involvement in private companies for this EV charging build-out. Some of that needs to happen, but it's going to get market-driven. Let's not lose sight of really the impact, that's going to happen to townships. And the strain that's going to put on fire departments. And I would absolutely support a component of that for the equipment alone, let alone if we can help to keep our township safe.
2 final observations. We got through 14 out of 17 questions. That's an A in my book. I'm not really good at math. As far as everything that you guys are doing, we hear it a lot on TV. We see it a lot about how divisive we are here in America. I think we saw a Republican and Democrats agree on quite a bit here today. And I think that says a lot about local and state government and where we are in today's politics. So I want to thank Senator Rosemary Brown, Senator Wayne Langerholtz, Representative Christine Sappy, and Representative Paul Takek. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.